Welcome back to our weekly series, the 50 State Cold Case Spotlight. Today we are in Arizona, our first day in Arizona, and I will be spotlighting the case of Brandy Myers. Brandy Myers was a 13-year-old girl who had her whole life in front of her. It was May 26, 1992, and Brandy was going door to door with her little sister Kristin, 11, to collect signatures for a bookathon sponsored by their school. Brandy and Kristin lived in a small apartment complex close to their elementary school, Sunny Slope. The apartment complex was just a few blocks from the school, and the girls had planned to walk through the neighborhood heading towards the school to collect signatures. When it was time to leave, Kristin decided she didn't want to go, but Brandy decided she was still going to go ahead and go by herself. Kristin still remembers watching Brandy walk out of the complex onto the sidewalk, and as she watched Brandy turn the corner, she had an unexpected wave of dread come over her. The neighborhood at this time, and still today, is a bustling community. The complex Kristin and Brandy were living in were across from the fire department, and there were two churches next door to the complex. The reason I mention this is because after walking the location with Kristin as my guide, it is clear to see that the neighborhood watches out for one another. So if a kid went missing in this neighborhood, it would be hard for someone not to see something. When Brandy didn't return home that night, she was reported missing, and the neighborhood quickly gathered to start a search party for Brandy. After interviewing those in the neighborhood, investigators were able to determine that Brandy was last seen around 8 p.m. knocking on the neighbor's door a few streets down from her complex. The following day, March 27th, while investigators and search teams were looking for Brandy, they came across a young girl's body in the Central Arizona Project Canal. The young female victim was around the same structure and build as Brandy, but it wasn't Brandy. Unfortunately, we would not identify the young girl until 2011. It was later determined that this was the body of a girl that had gone missing 8 weeks before Brandy's disappearance. Her name was Shannon Aumock. I will be covering Shannon's case tomorrow. I want to make sure she gets her spotlight as well. So tomorrow we will touch base with Shannon's life and death and how it's connected to Brandy's story. In November, 6 months into the search for Brandy, 22-year-old Angela Barrasso would go out for a bike ride in her Phoenix neighborhood and never return home. She was reported missing and her body was found within the week. Melanie Burness was a 17-year-old local high school student in Phoenix. She went on a bike ride near the canal in September of 1993, and she would be reported missing and her body would be found the following day in the canal. Her cause of death was multiple stab wounds. In January 2015, Phoenix police arrested a man named Bryan Patrick Miller after he allegedly attacked a woman he was giving a ride home. This young lady stated that he had just started stabbing her multiple times and she was able to flee from the car and seek help. At this point, they were able to take Miller's DNA and add it to the national database. That's when they got a hit on DNA evidence that tied them to both Angela and Melanie. If you would like to learn more about the investigation into Angela and Melanie's cases and how investigators were able to put together a successful case against Miller, which ended in a guilty verdict for both Melanie and Angela, you can find that information on the Brandy Myers Sipping on Some Crime episode or countless other articles, podcasts, and videos out there. So how does this all tie back to Brandy? The day Brandy disappeared, she had walked door to door in her neighborhood, which we know. We also have neighbors who last saw Brandy knocking on a few doors down the street. The very street that Brandy was last seen on just happens to be the same street that Bryan Patrick Miller resided on in May of 1992. He was renting an apartment in a little house that looked like it was remodeled and separated into 2 units. Brandy was seen knocking on a neighbor's door just 2 doors down from his door. Brandy's body was never found and we don't have DNA to work from, but investigators believe they had enough evidence to make Miller their key suspect in Brandy's disappearance. Let's go over the things that they believe pointed to Miller. Kristin and Brandy walked past Miller's house every day on their way to school. Miller lived in the same neighborhood where Angela and Melanie's bodies were disposed of, as well as the same neighborhood as Brandy. Miller has a proven history of violence towards women shown throughout previous arrests and court records. And then shortly after his arrest in 2015, Miller's ex-wife would come forward and tell police about a confession Miller had made to her about killing a young girl who knocked on their door one day in Phoenix in May of 1992. I am not going to go over the details of this confession in this video because I do not want it taken down. This is about making sure that Brandy gets her spotlight. The details are covered in the podcast episode, as well as many places online. This new information lined up with the timeline and the details of the young lady that matched Brandy and much more evidence pointing towards Miller. Investigators came to Brandy's sister Kristin shortly after that interview and told her they had found Brandy's killer. They stated that Miller was allegedly responsible for taking Brandy's life that day, and they were sure of it. Kristin has told reporters about the day that detectives came to her and told her who Brandy's killer was, saying, quote, The detective called me and said, we have him. We know what happened to Brandy down to the color of the bag Miller used to dispose of Brandy's body. But her case sits unresolved yet unsolved. End quote. Just imagine you have spent over 20 years searching for your sister, and then investigators sit you down to explain to you that they believe she was abducted by someone, brutally killed, and then her body was disposed of in a way that it can never be recovered. They know this because they are confident based on the evidence they collected. They have arrested him in connection with 2 other girls killed in the same neighborhood within the same time frame. However, they will not be seeking a conviction for your sister because they do not have a body and they don't think they'll win in court. Since Kristin was 11, she was left to pick up the pieces and has continued to pick up the pieces into her adulthood. Brandy being taken that day changed everyone who loved her, and it changed their entire neighborhood and community. And we know as years pass, evidence becomes harder to collect, and keeping the case fresh in the public's mind is the hardest part. Now that Miller is sitting on death row, Kristin, who has long said the reason she wants to go to court for Brandy is so that she can look the man in the eyes who she believes killed her sister and read her victim impact statement. But that chance is slipping away with every day. March 26th will be the 33rd anniversary of Brandy's disappearance. 11-year-old Kristin has been fighting for her big sister for 33 years. And in the words of Kristin, it's time we finally bring it home for Brandy. Please keep sharing Brandy's face in her case in hopes that we can implore Maricopa County and the Phoenix Police Department to do what's right in Brandy's case. If you would like to help amplify Brandy's voice, there's a link under my profile that will allow you to do just that with the click of a few buttons. I adore Brandy's sister, Kristin. I think she's one of the most genuine humans on the planet, and my heart hurts for her knowing another year is going to pass without justice for Brandy. Thank you so much for taking the time to get to know Brandy today. And don't forget, when you see those missing and murder posts on social media, to hit like and share. Because every time we share a face, we do get closer to solving a case. And I will see you all back here tomorrow for Arizona Day 2.